Hello and a warm welcome. You're watching my YouTube station, Smita Sharma, journalist. Now, the world is focused on the events that are unfolding in West Asia, in the Middle East. 2 years ago, on 7th of October 2023, is when we saw a brutal carnage, an armed attack, a terror attack launched from the Gaza Strip on Israel that killed hundreds of Israelis. This was an attack, a terror attack that was carried out by the Hamas. There are, of course, still some 48 hostages that Hamas has currently, of which 20 are believed to be alive. While we hope and pray that all of these hostages find their way back home and are reunited with their loved ones. At the same time, the events that followed that October 7 terror attack that has left the world completely shaken. The grinding war that has followed, the Israeli military action on Gaza, with millions of Palestinians already displaced, at least 66,000 Palestinians killed, most of them, almost half of them, considered to be women, young children, and babies. So where does the world stand today, really? That's a question that we're going to ask. And how do we look at things moving forward, look at the larger context of this entire issue? I'm joined here by Ambassador TS Tirumurti. He has been a retired career diplomat, served the Ministry of External Affairs in various positions, and also as India's ambassador to the United Nations. Many thanks, Ambassador Tirumurti, for joining me here.
No, thank you very much, Smita, for having you in your program.
You know, if I could start by asking you that the events that unfolded on 7th October 2023, absolutely horrific. Everybody needs to condemn those terror strikes. On hindsight now, after 2 years, do you realize what really was the goal of Hamas in launching the terror attack? Did Hamas really sort of achieve any of those goals?
No, thank you once again, Smita. I think there's a very timely, discussion we are having after 2 years of the 7th of October 2023, a terror attack by Hamas. When you actually look at 2023, the middle of 2023, if you, basically the whole Palestinian issue was going out of the minds of people. Whatever was being discussed in the UN Security Council is becoming a formality. They were all saying the right things. But if you look outside the Security Council, actually the reality was going in a different direction. And you already saw that the Abraham Accords was trying to normalize relations with the major Gulf countries and Arab countries. And Saudi Arabia was on the verge of signing one. And they were also, we were told that they were on the verge of signing a defense pact with the United States. So I think the Gulf countries had moved away from the Palestinian issue. They were looking at regional stability and regional integration. And that became their goal. And internally, the Palestinian Authority was stood discredited for various reasons, both external and internal. And Hamas was becoming unacceptable as an interlocutor, thanks to their strong ideology, attacks on Israel and other things. And on his part of Israel itself, you remember the famous map which Prime Minister Netanyahu showed of a new Middle East where there was no Gaza or West Bank at all in the map. So I think due to all these reasons, there was naturally a feeling that Palestinian issue was going to be get out of the the vision of any of the major countries of the world. And probably this was the main provocation why Hamas launched the terror attack on Israel. Now and now to your question, whether have they achieved the goal? Now, the very fact that we are discussing this and the very fact that there is a plan from none other than the President of the United States shows that they have certainly brought it back into the the vision of the world. If you're talking about Ukraine, we are also talking about Gaza. So that is how it is. So therefore, they have brought it very much into the public eye. People are discussing it. They realize that this is something which needs to be resolved if we have to move ahead. But what trajectory will it take is something which is still, one doesn't know at all. So therefore, to that limited extent, that yes, Hamas has achieved in bringing it back. People are looking at it. But where is it going? One doesn't really know at this point.
We will talk a little bit about that too. But, we spoke about maybe what were the key objectives of Hamas, but also in terms of Israel, because most people would argue that while that was a horrific terror attack that happened on 7th of October, that this invasion, the Israeli war didn't really start on 7th October 2023, that it has happened over the decades with the various number of blockades, the siege, that we have seen, whether it is in Gaza or the kind of Israeli domination in West Bank. How do you think Israel and Israelis themselves have changed post this attack?
No, actually, it's a very good question. See, within Israel, there is now a new generation, in addition to the older generation, a new generation who have completely forgotten about West Bank and Gaza. This generation, I don't think, realizes that Israel is still in occupation of the Palestinian territories. So, and that is, and therefore, this terror attack of Hamas has been a very rude awakening for them, particularly, that wow, we still have an issue, an unresolved issue on our hands, and that is one part of it. Secondly, the brutality of the attack of Hamas, I think it has completely shocked this generation, and in fact, all Israelis. So, therefore, when this happens, number one is an awakening that there is still an issue which Israel has to deal with, and the second thing is there has been a consolidation of the public opinion in Israel. Now, you recall that during the time of the Oslo Accords, the people who supported Prime Minister Rabin were and at that time you remember the Peace Now movement and others. There was a left, there was a middle who supported Rabin, and incidentally, if you recall, Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli. So that movement supported him and took it forward. Now that space is gone. You have right or middle of right, right, and far right. So therefore, there is a consolidation towards the right. And now, unfortunately, because of the attack, for many of the Israelis, Palestinians have become synonymous with Hamas. And I think, therefore, they are being looked at as less than human by the Israelis. That's the way I look at it. And so, therefore, the Israelis have become impervious to the hardships which the Palestinians have been undergoing, as well as the fact that now they are what you see unfolding in Gaza. So, I would say that, let me put it this way, Israel was always a hard state. They tried to dominate. That's partly because of the very rough neighborhood in which they were living. So it was a hard state. But now they have become a harsh state. That's the way I look at it. And they are, by long stretch of thing, they are the dominant power in the region. They have tried to. They have cut down Iran to size. They have cut down Iranian proxies to size. They cut down Hezbollah. They have actually emasculated Syria. So they are the dominant. That is the new reality in the region. But at the same time, I think the Israelis have also veered to the left. And at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that's the best space to be in for the Israelis and for Israel.
So just to follow up on this, because you've made some very important points, and this point that I think the new generation of Israelis, they now have an even harsher views of Palestinians, looking at all of them as perhaps a member of Hamas. But having said that, we've seen some protests happening within Israel asking for the ending of the war. Is that only related for the possible release, asking for the release of the hostages who are yet to come back home, and really doesn't have a bearing on Israel's larger policy on Palestine, Gaza, West Bank? Is that what you're saying then?
You are right. I think as of now, they are agitating only for the release of the hostages. And earlier, if you recall, Prime Minister Netanyahu had faced huge protests, but they were domestic. But right now, I think those issues have been set aside. And they are protesting only for the release of the hostages so that they can come back home. And they genuinely feel that he's not doing enough to have these hostages released. And that is, I think, the main provocation.
Okay, coming to what is happening now and what is playing out now. As we talk, there are attempts being made to look at some sort of a possible ceasefire. It's the 20-point peace plan that has been proposed by Donald Trump on Gaza. He has proposed some peace plans in the past too. And, earlier in the year also, we saw certain phases of ceasefire which didn't hold up really. What is your view on the current peace plan that has been proposed by Donald Trump?
You know, Before I go to this peace plan, the one big difference between this plan and the other plans, which I wanted to just highlight, uh, and that's an important difference, is that all the earlier plans, they were actually rooted in one way or another in the past, in the sense that whether it was based on international law, or there were these UN Security Council resolutions which were passed, some decisions, understandings, agreements, in one way or another, they were reflected in the earlier plans. But this plan is reflecting the reality on the ground. It is not getting into all those understandings and agreements which have been reached earlier. And what I mean by this is that it is looking at the release of the hostages, which is very central to the plan, but it's also looking at getting rid of Hamas. It is looking at continued domination of Israel in the region, because after all, there is a regional aspect to this. It is looking at the idea of continuing to dominate Gaza on the security front. It is also looking, of course, at the humanitarian front, and how do we resolve the issue of governance in Gaza? Can it be done with the Palestinians or from an international involvement in all this? So I think they are looking only at the Gaza war and how to end it and how to go forward. I think that's a big difference. And as far as the plan itself is concerned, it's very clearly a US-Israeli plan. And the other thing is that it is a statement of intentions, and this is something which I've written about, that it is a statement of intention of how to go about this, not as much a roadmap. At best, it is a statement of intention, and at worst, it is an instrument of surrender. That is what I had written about this. The positive thing, if at all one should say something about the plan, is that it is a comprehensive one. It covers a wide range. It covers security. It covers certain degree of economic development. It covers humanitarian aid, and there is also some commitment to no ethnic cleansing. That the Gazans will now not be in a position; they won't be sent out, and then it all talks about de-radicalization of Hamas, which is something which even the region is looking at and they want. And finally, of course, it is trying to secure the Israeli security, in addition to humanitarian aid and a whole lot of other things. But the great drawback is that there are no timelines. And when there are no timelines, particularly for idea of withdrawal, the Israeli Defense Forces withdrawal from Gaza, then you're literally, and the only timeline, by the way, is that the hostages will be released within 72 hours of the ceasefire. So, really, exactly where the plan is landing. And everything else after that, you are actually at the mercy of the Israelis, whether they implement the plan or not. And you recall that in January, when there were these three stages, and the Israeli did not implement the plan, they just actually literally threw away the plan after the first phase or even before the first phase. So the apprehension is, if you don't have a timeline going forward, then it's going to be fatal to the plan. And if it is fatal, then someone has to do the heavy lifting to make sure the plan survives. And of course, the most obvious drawback is West Bank is nowhere in this plan. So you're not really looking at solving the Palestinian issue, but you're really looking at the current reality on the ground. And so therefore, the question is, will it survive, after the hostages are released?
Even before reaching that stage of the redevelopment plans, there's an international stabilization force, a board that has to be created. Controversial world leader like Tony Blair, given his Iraq past, has been included in the board, which has not gone down well with Palestinians. But having said that, as you yourself mentioned, that this proposed plan is different from the ones in the past. But even as Donald Trump was asking Netanyahu in that publicized statement to stop the bombing, we have continued to see reports of Palestinians being killed. Over 50, 60 Palestinians have been killed in the last, in fact, of 48 to 72 hours since the announcement. Do you really feel there is an appetite within the Netanyahu regime, particularly, for Mr. Netanyahu himself, to actually end this war, to go towards a ceasefire?
No, there is not much of an appetite. to end this war, except to the extent that they need a ceasefire to have the hostages released. Because definitely Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure from his domestic constituency. There is no doubt about it. So, therefore, there is a great deal of pressure on him to make sure the hostages are released. So, therefore, to that extent, you have a ceasefire. But now, while the Israeli government may not have the appetite to go through with the rest, and they would rather like to be there and finish it off militarily, which is what they have been frankly trying to do for the last 2 years. But the thing would be that where is there an appetite for the rest of the world, particularly the United States and the Arab world, to make sure that this ceasefire sticks and that this is used to have a slightly, I would say, a set of steps which they have envisaged in the plan. Can that also be implemented? That is something which I'm not so sure that we can write off the pressure from the United States and the others on Israel. And how Israel tackles it, we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to be quite as simple as what they did in January by tearing up the rest of the plan. So that's something which is still up in the air.
Just staying with that question, because the perception is that Mr. Netanyahu's political survival itself depends on this war. I mean, the day this war ends, perhaps, as you mentioned, that he has enough domestic opposition at this point in time. So that then keeps him with that interest that, let the war continue. And if this continues, if Israel doesn't hold up its side of the terms and agreements, will there be enough US pressure for them to actually, come back and do what is being asked to do within this proposed peace plan, or the US will once again give them a free pass?
Actually, Smita, your question is very, very important, because it's very interesting. When he began the whole thing and we started expanding it to the region, there was this feeling, and quite rightly, the feeling that a lot of it was also about his survival, because the far right partners of his threatened to leave the coalition whenever there is talk of peace, whenever there is talk of ceasefire, whenever he was trying to be backtracking a little bit and accommodating the others. Now, if you look at what has actually happened, and by the way, he presided over the biggest intelligence failure in the history of Israel, and that was a huge thing, And for the first time, he actually had someone coming into Israel and attacking Israelis and killing them. This is the first time ever, and it was under his watch. So he was under tremendous pressure to show that he can still be a leader and he can lead. But after 2 years, if you look at it, he has basically emasculated all the external threats, whether it is Iran, or the proxies, Hezbollah, Syria, and now he's going after the Hamas. Hamas is considerably degraded. So if you actually look at it, he's in a much, much better position than what he started. And right now, I would even go to the extent of saying that maybe he enjoys a much, much greater support among the people for what he has done and what he's claimed that he has done, that he has brought greater security for the Israelis by, countering all these threats. So I look at it this way: he's in a much stronger position now than before. And today, probably the far right needs him more than he reached the far right. If we were to, let's assume theoretically he goes for elections now, I don't know, but my feeling is that he may win the elections. So, and he doesn't need the far right anymore as he used to need them before. So, therefore, he's in a stronger position to also dictate to the United States and others in one way or another. So, therefore, you're right. I mean, to the extent that the United States and others will also be coming under pressure by him. But at the same time, he's no more as weak or as vulnerable, not weak, as vulnerable as he was probably 2 years ago.
That's a very, interesting and an important assessment, reading of where Netanyahu stands today, politically, domestically, and on the international stage, because many were arguing that, he's almost lost. There are countries that have gone against him. There are countries that we have seen finally come out and recognize Palestine, whether it's France, whether it's Canada, that he was perhaps being globally pushed on. We also saw that image of Donald Trump sitting with him, making him call up the Qataris, to issue an apology for the strike on that. But despite all of that, your assessment is that he has grown stronger today. So, having said that, do you really think that the crucial element of this peace deal, which is the ceasefire, before the ceasefire happens, this hostage swap to take place, will that take place? 48 Israeli hostages, 20 of them believed to be alive, 1,700 Palestinian, prisoners in jail. Do you see an equal amount of interest from both sides to let this swap happen?
Yeah, I think there is equal pressure on both sides to have this swap happen. And that's how I will put it. But it's interesting. I mean, it's a very unequal swap. And that's the reason why Hamas is procrastinating. See, Hamas cannot arrest Israelis, but the Israelis can arrest Hamas, or Israelis can arrest Palestinians. So it's a very unequal thing that once the hostages are released, and that's how the Hamas seems to see it, and quite rightly, I suppose, from their side, this is how they are seeing it, even though we condemn the fact that they took hostages. But the fact is that they are thinking that if, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Palestinians are released, but they can be, arrested day after tomorrow after they exchange. And let us put it in perspective. 18,000 Palestinians have been arrested only in the West Bank since October 7th. So we are really looking at a very different type of equation here. So that said, I suppose there is a lot of interest and pressure on both sides to have them released, and at least for Hamas to now say that, well, please make sure, he's talking to the international community, that this actually becomes a ceasefire which will hold.
So, where do you really find, you did say that, of course, Israel has managed to weaken out, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas. How weak organizationally, ideologically do you find Hamas? Do you think they will be able to spring back again, regroup again, or they've really been weakened out this time?
That, Hamas, obviously, organizationally, they are in a very bad shape. And Israel has made sure that their organization structure has been decimated in one way or the other. They still exist, obviously, but the organization structure is no more the same. Ideologically, once again, they've taken a huge hit. But I don't think we should write off their ideology. You can write off Hamas, but maybe not their ideology just yet. Now, looking at it the other way, the biggest disservice which Hamas has done to the Palestinian issue is the fact that they have made this fight against between an occupier and an occupied, and the fight for the state of Palestine into a religious issue. You recall that the PLO and others, they fought for the state of Palestine, and they had a wide spectrum of people from the left to the middle to the center. There were even those who were atheists, and you had religious people. And so they were all there. They included Muslims, Christians. After all, the land of Palestine had Muslims, Christians, and Jews. So therefore, they have made this into an ideological issue. They made it into a Jews versus Muslims type of issue. And that's a big disservice which they have done. And if they had actually fought, let us assume theoretically, for a state of Palestine, they may well have realized the big mistake they have done by trying to splinter the integrity of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And the outsiders have been very happy when they splintered this, and they have used Hamas to divide the Palestinians. Israelis used Hamas to divide the Palestinians. So this is how I see it. And also the big difference is that now Hamas has lost a very big benefactor, which is Iran. And that is, I think, an important thing, that they are losing outside support. They lost their benefactor, they have lost their organization, and to some extent, their ideology is getting worn out and discredited. So therefore, I think they are not in a great shape.
But there's, of course, many a slip between the cup and the lid between now to what happens with the ceasefire, the hostage swap, before we reach the final stage of redeveloping Gaza and the future of Palestine. So one of the points, of course, in that 20-point plan, which the Hamas welcomed with accepting certain key elements, not all of it. Interestingly, they used the word genocide in their statements, and their statements were actually retweeted by both Donald Trump and JD Vance. Do you think the Hamas will, if they continue to be in whichever position they are right now, Will they actually give up control of Gaza, which they have had since 2007? Will they agree to disarming, paving a way for a technocratic setup?
Yeah, see, they have agreed to a technocratic setup. You're absolutely right. They have not yet agreed to disarming, and we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, they have also indicated in their statement, which they put out, that while they're agreeing to the technocratic setup, but the future of Palestine should be with the Palestinian governance, and that should be decided by the Palestinians. And they are looking at a broader Palestinian consensus, which includes all the factions to come together to see how the future of Palestine, who will govern, and that dialogue, they say, should take place, and they want to be part of the dialogue. So they are very clear that they are very much there. And they need to be part of the dialogue looking at the future of the governance structure. So therefore, this is very much part of their statement which they put out. So and we must also understand, of course, there is a bit of history in this, and you are aware of this, that in 2006, when the elections to the so-called Palestinian Legislative Council took place, which expanded one, Hamas won the elections fair and square. And out of the 132 or 34 seats, they got 74 of them. And in fact, the Palestinian Authority, the group, they came only second to Hamas. So in a way, they won the elections. And after that, of course, various things happened, and in which the elections were literally annulled. And so therefore, we have to be a bit more careful about when we talk about governance going into the future, whether it will lie entirely with this international stabilization force backed by international set of experts and others sitting and deciding on the future of Gaza. There is, in the plan as of now, there is no road to democracy in Palestine, except that once the Palestinian Authority reforms, then in one way or the other, they will be given governance of Gaza. That's some sort of a promise which is there.
Will you be able to crystal gaze with how do you really see the future of the displaced Palestinians? At least 2.3 million Palestinians displaced, and tens of thousands of them from Gaza itself since October 2023. Do you see them returning to their land?
The Palestinians were internally displaced within Gaza. The plan, we may not agree with the plan in many aspects, but the fact is the plan has an economic angle to it, and it has a security angle, it has other angles to it. So therefore, what we are looking at by way of reconstruction of Gaza, for example, so these are all things which are in the plan. Of course, unfortunately or fortunately, that so-called Riviera of the Middle East type of thing plan and all that actually skewed the pitch. But whereas if you look at it realistically, yes, there will be requirement for rebuilding, and there needs to be a place for the internally displaced Palestinians to come back to. And so therefore, let me put it this way. In the Middle East, you cannot but remain optimistic. There is so many things which are going wrong that optimism is the only thing which keeps you alive. Hope is the only thing which keeps you alive. So looking at it this way, I'm still hopeful that they will come back, especially because the plan rules out ethnic cleansing, that they will be sent out of Gaza, which is what they had, it had articulated earlier in so many words, President Trump and others. Now that is ruled out expressly in the plan. So I'm hoping that you will go to a better space, provided the ceasefire sticks.
So just the last 2-3 questions to you then. Keeping in mind that several commentators across the globe, including the likes of Israeli author Gideon Levy, they have argued that the two-state solution died long ago, that it really doesn't hold anymore, even if things were to calm down. What is your view? Because that's also been India's traditional stand.
There are not too many options on this. One is a two-state solution. The other is a unitary state. And now Gideon Levy and others have been proposing a unitary state. But it comes with a very obvious clause, which is that in a unitary state, you have to extend the same rights to minorities, which means that one way or the other, if Palestinians get equal rights in a unitary Israeli state, then the Jewish component will be barely more than 50%. There'll be a huge non-Jewish component. Now, which means the character of the Israeli state as a Jewish state will be diminished. And therefore, what he's also saying simultaneously is let us embrace a more pluralistic state and others. Now, I'm not so sure whether that will be acceptable. You have a Jewish state, you have made it a Jewish state, and that I think is something which will endure. In which case, you're automatically coming to a point when you will not be able to extend equal rights to Palestinians, in which case you're going to be an apartheid state. So that is the danger there, that yes, you annex West Bank and Gaza, but you become an apartheid state like South Africa used to be. And then you will have another set of problems, and you may well have to face what happened in South Africa, in Israel also. And right now, at least, West Bank and Gaza are not annexed to Israel. But they are very much, Israel has said they will annex West Bank, in which case you will have an apartheid state. Now, looking at the two-state solution, it is as good a solution as the unitary solution which Gideon Levy has proposed. Of course, the realities on the grounds are changing. But has it really changed in Gaza? I don't think so. The plan expressly acknowledges the fact that there could be, it talks about demilitarized Palestinian, Gaza. It talks about the de-radicalized Gaza. And they are all talking about Gaza as an entity. So therefore, it still exists as an entity. It's only the West Bank where it is being eroded. And I have actually written about this a year ago, maybe partly in jest, but partly seriously. There could be a third option. The option is that Israelis could annex West Bank and they could give an independent state in Gaza. What stops them? If the plan is really what it is, demilitarized, de-radicalized, and under international supervision, you have a thing. Israelis may well say that, yeah, Gaza is your state. Please take it. So you may actually have both the plans being implemented. One is a unitary state with West Bank being annexed, and another one is Gaza with being given an independent state. So this is as much maneuvering you can do within these two options which are there.
And there are just so many ifs and buts involved, but heartbreaking tragedies that keep unfolding here. Just the last two questions. I mean, we spoke about Hamas, but when it comes to the PLO, really, I mean, where do you find them today? It's also been, a problem of the fact that they're there on paper, they're there as an idea. Do you still find them representative of the larger Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people?
No, there is no representation as of now among the leadership to say that we represent Palestinians. So that is something which is not there. But that said, it doesn't mean these various factions don't exist. See, it is interesting. When I was in Gaza, for example, Arafat was the undisputed leader of the Palestinians. Of course, Hamas was very much there. But there was this effort by the international community, the Israelis and major countries. They wanted to make sure that he was cut down to size. So I remember that when I was there in Gaza and living there, Israelis released Sheikh Yassin, who was the spiritual founder of Hamas, into Gaza Strip. So when he came into Gaza, I mean, obviously they were strengthening the Hamas in Gaza instead of strengthening the secular forces and the forces with Arafat there. And ultimately, you've seen what happened in 2006. So there was also a very systematic attempt by Israel and the others to cut down the Palestinian side. Therefore, the Palestinian Authority is discredited. Of course, the Palestinian Authority themselves have been corrupt. They have been seen to be, let's say, playing the Israeli game and stooges of Israel. So they stand discredited as a group which is fighting for, ending the occupation. So therefore, when you look at all this and the propping up of Hamas by Israel, which is a reality, I mean, everyone knows how it happened. So therefore, you don't have anyone to represent the Palestinians and say we can represent all of them. But let me say that's about the leadership. We don't have leadership, but we have people who still believe not just in the Palestinian cause, so to say, but they are also believe in the PLO. They also believe in what in the Hamas ideology, what they stand for. So I think it's important for them to now build that leadership, come together and build a leadership. It can be a collective leadership or going forward, but they need to bring back one way or the other the larger leadership which the PLO brought together, a group of people. They had the PFLP, they had the DFLP, all of them were there together. How can they bring in a different way a set of leadership which the majority of the Palestinians can relate to, for which they need to work together?
So, which leads me just to the final question then, as far as India's role is concerned, and given India's traditional ties with Palestine and then the increased proximity with the Israeli regime under the current government here in India, led by Prime Minister Modi, we've seen India's changing stance in the United Nations. There is a feeling that India sort of moved away from its traditional stance, did course corrections every now and then. Did India also fail the Palestinian cause? Was there a lot more that India should have done here?
I mean, there is no doubt that India has taken a pro-Israeli stand in its foreign policy, at least in the last several years, and that is something which has happened in an organic way, given our own national interests. So I'm not doubting the fact that our national interests have helped made us take this pro-Israeli stand. But we have also not taken an active, engaged position in the Gaza war. And this is something which I have been writing extensively about, that India should have taken and should take an actively engage with the Gaza war, one way or another. I'm not talking about mediation, but the fact is we should stay engaged with it, because India has strong interests in the Middle East, in the Gulf, I think that we could have certainly done a lot more, and we should have been more forthright in stating some of the things which is happening there, because we also they also have domestically, we have people who support the Palestinian issue. So therefore, I think on all counts, we could have definitely taken a more active stand. That's something I agree with you. And the other larger context is that I'm anxious that India should not get marginalized in the process by not taking an active stand. You cannot afford to get marginalized in whatever is happening in the Middle East, just as we should not be getting marginalized on the Ukraine front by, by not taking an active stand. So therefore, I think I look at it in a larger context of India itself, in its own national interest, India as growing bigger and aspiring to be one of the poles. Then, in which case, we cannot keep quiet on the issues which are happening elsewhere. Because when it comes to us, we are very anxious that the world should also come and engage with us and appreciate our point of view. Similarly, I think it's important the world also expects us to be taking an active part in issues which concern them. So therefore, I agree that yes, India should be taking a more active position, get more actively engaged with the Gaza war, and we have a lot to contribute. Let us not forget that we established, we were one of the first countries, in non-Muslim countries or whatever, to recognize the state of Palestine. So there is, and the Israelis know that, and so therefore, let us see how this shapes up. And I do hope that we take a more forward-looking stand on this.
So I think the only thing that we can hope right now is for hope and prayers that there will be eventually peace. The feeling has grown a lot across the world that world leaders have failed the Palestinians, and that much had to be done much before, of course, the killings of so many Palestinians. Once again, I repeat that we need to absolutely condemn what happened on October 7, 2023. There were brutal, horrific terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas. They had their own objectives. Ambassador Tirumurti has beautifully given us an analysis and a sense and insight into what is really happening in the region. But at the same time, for the Palestinians who have been killed, who have been displaced, who continue to be killed and continue to be imprisoned, there has to be justice that needs to prevail. It's already too late now. Thank you so much, Ambassador Tirumurti, for joining me here in this conversation. It's always insightful to read your articles. My viewers can also go and look up for your articles, and whether it's the Hindustan Times, the Hindu, prolific writer there. And I think what you bring to the table, most importantly, as a retired diplomat, is a sense of empathy into the issue, which I find largely missing in a time in a time when the world is just so much focused on transactionalism, and the moral compass seems to be something that we have lost a lot. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all of you as also who tuned in. Keep watching my YouTube station, Smita Sharma Journalist, for more such content. Thanks and take care.